I know you're gonna dig this.
This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles, recorded live here at DATV Studios in Dayton, Ohio. Zooming in all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, is Victor Wooten. Victor is an American bassist, record producer, educator, and recipient of 5 Grammy Awards. He has been the bassist for Béla Fleck and the Flecktones since the group's formation in 1988. He was also the bassist for SMV along with Stanley Clarke and Marcus Miller. Since 2017, he has played bass for the metal band Nitro. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well, and honored to be here.
It is, when I'm looking at a living legend here of 5 Grammy Awards. They just don't happen every day. You just don't see these kind of people every day, and I'm just so honored to be in your presence to know that you have received 5. That's a lot.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate that you, we'll celebrate and let people like me that just do what we love to do, to let us come on your show and talk with you. I appreciate that.
Well, Victor, let's just start off with, how did you get interested in music, and what's your beginning? How did you learn to play? How did you get to where you are today, and how does funk really play in your life?
Yeah, well, it was my upbringing. I am the youngest of 5 brothers and 2 wonderful parents, musical parents. My parents don't play or didn't play any instruments. They grew up old primitive Baptists where they didn't allow instruments in the church. So they didn't grow up playing any instruments, but they sang, they listened, they supported music. And when my 3 older brothers, when they were very, very young, probably like, 5, 6, and 7, they found music. They started playing and having fun with it. And then when my older brother Joseph was born, they started including Joseph into the band, into the music. So when I was born, being the last one, they just included me. So the same way, Ryan, that I was learning to speak English from my family, I was also learning to speak music from my family. And so, growing up for me, the 60s, but my other brothers were about the 50s. It was a good time for music. It was a time where funk music was starting to, get to really shine on the radio. So it was just a great era for music. And so I was able to because of my brothers, I was, growing up and raised aware of the music because we were playing it. I was out gigging and doing shows with them when I was about, 5 and 6 years old. We actually, Ryan, we actually were the opening band. When I was 5, I turned 6 during a tour where we were opening for the great Curtis Mayfield. We were his opening band for a while. I think it was during his Superfly tour, and we were living in California at the time. So we were exposed to some really incredible music at a very early age.
That's just fascinating to think that you were opening for the Curtis Mayfield out there in California. And so often we think about artists such as you, that you start at such a young age so that we don't see, when you give your resume, you have all this experience, but you started young.
Right, exactly.
Yes, you started young. And I think that when I hear you tell this story about being with Curtis Mayfield, and I mean, he was a living legend when I was growing up, so starting with the Impressions and moving on. I think that we fail to remember some of the shoulders that we stand on where we are today. And that's what Funk Chronicles is all about. That is what the Funk Museum is all about, is that allowing people such as you, Victor, who have such a rich history, tell your story. Because if we don't tell our story, who's going to tell it?
Exactly. And we all have good stories. We all do. Everybody has a story to tell. And I appreciate you allowing me and allowing so many of us to tell our story. Thank you for that.
And so, coming from that experience, well, your family was in California. How long did you stay in California, and what was that whole experience there in California?
Yeah, it was good for me. Some of my fondest memories. Our dad was military, so we moved a lot. And so for me being the youngest, I moved the least of the 5 boys, but I still moved a lot. I was actually born in Idaho on an Air Force base. And from there, I think we moved to Hawaii. And it was in Hawaii where I first started playing with my brothers. And I just had a toy plastic guitar, but I would jam with them. And I don't even think I went to school in Hawaii. I started school when we finally moved to California, Sacramento, California. So, but we were playing gigs. We started playing gigs. I think, I was either in kindergarten or before when our parents started realizing, well, these kids are good. Let's get them in some shows. We were doing Battle of the Bands. Then we started playing at the officers' clubs, at the military base, and all this kind of stuff. And we stayed in California until I finished 2nd grade. And then in the fall of '72, when I finished 2nd grade, we packed up everything and drove to Virginia, coast to coast, to where Virginia and North Carolina, where my grandparents were from, and we settled there. We stayed in Virginia from the end of '72, and for me, all the way up to the end of '88. But in California and Virginia, we started growing as musicians and as a 5-piece brother band. And there's a ton of stories there. Some of the shows we did, the people we opened for, the people we got to
name some of them. Name some of the bands that you opened for, Victor.
Absolutely. In California, we opened for War. Band War. Yeah, back in their heyday. Of course, we did a lot of shows with Curtis Mayfield. We opened for the Temptations. I may be getting California and Virginia mixed up a little bit, but different people, Frankie Beverly and Mays. Man, my brother's memories are better than mine because they were older. They remember more of it. It was just a whole lot. I know I'm forgetting a ton of artists and acts. Yeah, Stephanie Mills. When Kashif, we met this producer Kashif when he was with Stephanie Mills, so we ended up working with him. There were a lot.
So were you called the Wooten Brothers at that time, or?
Exactly. The Wooten Brothers.
The Wooten Brothers.
There were 5 of us.
And what were the age ranges?
So I'm the youngest.
Yes.
So some of the posters, I think you guys at the museum are going to get one of our old posters.
Okay. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you too. So I was, we did it for so long, but the poster that you'll see, I was 8 and they featured me a lot. So I was the 8-year-old bass ace. So if I was 8, my brother Joseph, the next in line, was 3 years older than me. So he's 11. And then 3 years older than Joseph at 14 is Rudy. And then only a year older than Rudy at 15 is Roy. And then at 16 is Reggie, the eldest. So from Reggie down to me is only 8 years difference.
So now y'all know your parents were right there as your managers along the way. So how did you manage school during that time?
Yeah, well, our parents were there for all of it. You know, I mean, of course, they were the management. My mom was the seamstress, dad was the chauffeur, the bodyguard, you know, the enforcer if anybody got too close to the boys, you know, all of that, all of it. But what I can remember, Ryan, what I can remember is sometimes when I would have to come home from school on a Friday, do some homework, and then take a nap. And many of the cases when we were living in Virginia, we played a whole lot in North Carolina. So we'd have a 3-hour drive. So I would come home from school, do a little homework. We would hop in the car and I would have to take a nap, or supposed to take a nap in the car. So I would lay down and either sleep or act like I was sleeping. And then we would go to North Carolina and we'd have to play shows at the nightclub from 10 p.m. to 2 in the morning. And that was our normal schedule, 10 to 2. And we would take one 45-minute break in between. And that was it. So my parents, they didn't homeschool. We went to public school, but we got more of an education from our parents. You know, especially my mom, she would not let us get bad grades. There were things that she made us learn how to do, like speak, like become good writers. We had to learn how to type. We had to know who we were as people. We had to learn and recite different things, parts of speeches and you know, things that made us know who we were. Because our parents knew what 5 black boys were facing in the 50s and 60s, and that, you know, we had to know how to know who we were and support ourselves, knowing that we might be facing a world that won't support us back. So our parents were very, very educational, and they made sure we got a more fuller education than our schools were offering.
You know, and that's so important to note that when black families are under attack, to know that, to hear your story, it is heartwarming to know that your parents were looking out for you at a time when they knew, even today, is the same issues that they had back in the 50s and 60s especially for African American males and talented African American males.
Right.
And that's one of those things that really makes you appreciate your parents and those experiences to help you stand today. That helps you stand and be who you are.
Absolutely.
And so when you talk about your, you know, we were talking about your camp, and you want to talk a little bit about your camp, your base nature camp?
Sure, absolutely. Through growing up, learning from my parents, as I got older, and especially when I became a parent, it really dawned on me what I was provided as a child from our 2 wonderful parents. And for me, it was like I had 4 or more parents, because not everybody was as fortunate as me to have the upbringing and the guidance that I had. So I wanted to share that with people, coupled with the fact that I had different views on music education, because I felt that the way people were learning music was actually slowing them down. And the way I had learned from my brothers actually sped me up so that I could be on a major tour, you know, within a few short years of even learning to play. You know, if you think about this, you know, I was lucky enough to get to play and tour literally at 5 and 6 years old. But the real story and the real gift and celebration should be my older brother, Reggie, who, when I was 2 years old and he was teaching me, he was only 10. And he taught me and he taught my brother Joseph, who was 5. He taught us so well that we could be on a tour within a few short years, not just a tour with Curtis Mayfield. So my brother Reggie is the best teacher I think in existence that I've ever experienced. And I wanted other people to experience that. So I started doing a music camp. A music camp it started out for the first 7 years only for bass players. And then after that, my wife and I bought a location. We bought some property and we, with the help of our past students, we built a camp, and we do it on our own property now called Wooten Woods. But the main thing is I wanted to I hate to even call it teach, but I'll just use that word. I wanted to teach life, because my mom had a saying. She said, "What does the world need with just another good musician?" She says, "We have plenty." She said, "What the world needs are good people." So her idea and mine now and my brother's is, if we're going to spend all this time, effort, money, energy into learning anything, and for us it was music, it needs to make us good people. So that when we do it, other people become better people also. And so the camp is really designed to help create better people. We just do it through music. So at the camp, I give a lot of my upbringing, lessons from my parents and from my brothers. And also knowing that both of my parents grew up poor on the farm, on farms in nature, I started to learn the benefit of nature. And so I include nature in all of my camps. So they're music and nature camps, or bass and nature camps. And we're outdoors. We're, of course we have, indoor facilities and sleeping cabins, but it's in the middle of the woods, and everybody lives there together for the duration of the camp. And nature does its thing without having to try. Nature just does its thing on you. And I'll end it with this. If we're all trying to become natural at whatever we do, nature is the best example. Nature is the most natural thing on the planet, because to be natural means to be like nature. But in music, they lock us in a room and tell us to practice. That's the most unnatural way to learn anything. You don't learn to talk to people in a room practicing by yourself. The natural way is to be out and about, jamming with people, talking to everyone. And that's how we got so good at talking, because we jammed with people from birth. And in learning to talk, nobody sticks beginners with beginners. You don't stick your little baby with other babies and say, okay, figure it out. The babies jam with professionals. That's how we learn to talk so quickly. So at our camps, we don't separate the beginners from the professionals. We all play together. And all of a sudden, everybody's jamming right away and learning quickly and loving each other and themselves in the process. And so that's what our camps are about. Basically, it's built upon my upbringing.
Well, now, how long does the camp last, and how do people who are interested in coming to your camp, how do you go about that?
Sure. People can find out about our camps right now by going to the camp website. And I'll give you 2 places. The easiest place is just to remember my name, Victor Wooten. .com. VictorWooten.com will get you anywhere you want to go if you want to find out anything about me. You can link to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but my schedule is always there, as well as the camp schedule. But if you go there and click on the camps, it'll take you to the campsite, which is Vic's Camps, but I spell it VIXCAMPS. VixCamps.com will take you straight to the campsite. The schedule's always there, as well as how to register and the prices of the camps and all of that. We take beginners to experts. I think we either start at age 8 or 10. I can't remember, maybe 10, I don't know. but we go up to, I think we say 99 or something like that. And camps can range from 2 days to 2 weeks, depending on the camp that you come to.
Well, I mean, that's a wonderful vision to have and to even implement. Giving back, and you can, and that's what it's all about. I always like to quote Shirley Chisholm. She may not have been in the funk era, but she said, "Service is the price you pay for the space you use," and I truly do believe that with all my heart, that giving back is the key to success of a future.
I like that. Exactly. Because what we're doing, whether it's funk and everything, we're actually kind of like, especially this earth that we're living on, we're renting it kind of from our kids. We got to give it to them at some point, and hopefully we return it better than we found it. It should be getting better, and funk is the same way. Like, I grew up on funk, but I can't say that I own it. At some point, I have to turn it over to the next generation. And I want to do that as best as possible. And like you're saying, and Shirley Chisholm says, the best way to do is to educate, to give back, to help, to let people stand on your shoulders and hold them up higher than you, as well as to educate and help them know where the funk or where whatever came from, so that they can not only see the shoulders they're standing on, but know who and what they are, And I believe, I like Shirley Chisholm's quote. I'm gonna have to write that one down. Thank you.
Well, one of the things leading right into that is to talk to your experiences. How does the funk intertwine? Because I see that, that you not only play the bass guitar, you play the cello, the double bass, keys, drums. So you have, especially going from the cello to well, I mean, they're all string instruments except for the drum, I think. And so, taking that menagerie of instruments, how does the funk relate to Victor Wooten?
Sure. Well, funk, I heard Bootsy say funk is a lifestyle, and it is hard to grow up a person of color, I guess, and in the 50s and 60s and 70s and even 80s and not understand funk, because it's really how we grew up. It is working hard, and as Bootsy would say, making something out of nothing, and my thought, the people of color, and it almost doesn't matter which country which continent you come from, whether it's, Australia or down south or Africa, wherever, when you got color in your skin, you feel rhythm in a different way. You just feel rhythm in a different way from your upbringing. And funk, for me, it's a feeling, it's an emotion, but it's very, very, a large ingredient is the rhythm. The rhythm. And the instruments I play, the string instruments, the bass, is in a part of the band they call the rhythm section. And rhythm makes you move. As my brother Reggie says, rhythm will wake the dead bones, right? You can try not to move, but if we get funky, you're going to start moving, right? So funk is like, again, I love Bootsy Collins, it's making something out of nothing. So, you don't, like when we were kids, we didn't even have real instruments, but we could get funky on them, whether it was pots or pans, or we used to bite the end of straws and make it like a reed and play like flutes on it. Funk is an emotion, it's a style of music, but it's definitely a style that's going to make you have to move, And I'm fortunate to have learned about it as a very, very young kid. I got to see James Brown when I was in the first and the second grade. Saw Earth, Wind and Fire a bunch of different times, and we got to see some of the early funk shows, Sly and the Family Stone and different people like that. And we might think of funk as a certain style of music, funky style of music, but it can go beyond that. Funk is tied to blues, it's tied to jazz, it's definitely tied to gospel, A lot of people don't even know that bluegrass music, which we might think of as a particularly white music, the instrument, the banjo, came from Africa. And a lot of this, like what we call the hillbilly type songs, it came out of funky stuff. It came out of African music. And so there's even funk in that, right? Béla Fleck, who you mentioned earlier, Béla Fleck is a banjo player, but he's a white guy from New York. But he heard that sound and just fell in love with it. And basically, a banjo is just a drum head, like a snare drum with strings on it. So it's a funky instrument if you play it that way. And the history of the banjo is from Africa. It was invented in Africa. And Béla, even though he's technically Caucasian, he understands that. And he actually went to Africa and spent months, at least a month over there, I think, and researched the history of the banjo, played with a lot of those musicians, and made a little documentary movie about it called Throw Down Your Heart, where he's playing, and a few records actually that you can find where he's playing with all these great African musicians. So he understands where it comes from. But it's interesting that most of our people, African American people, don't even know that the history of the banjo and bluegrass music comes from Africa.
But when we talk about the history of music, sometimes our people do not realize that classical music, the Beethovens and all of that came from Africa. And that most music genre that we even have today originated from Africa. And that we owe so much to our ancestors for today. Now, just getting on the light side of things, tell me so far 3 highlights of your career.
Sure.
I'm sure you have 100, but I'm just asking you to give me about 3 highlights that our audience would be interested in that would make them smile.
Sure. I'll give you some, but and I'm going to share at least one that may not look like as a good one, and I'll start there. But highlights are things that make you better, things that make you better. And if you're only learning from and only paying attention to the good parts of life, we're missing half the picture. In many cases, the things that make us the strongest are the things that don't go your way, because life knows better than we do. So we shouldn't want everything to always go our way. We want life to take us where we need to go. And one story is, we mentioned Curtis Mayfield. And so I'm 5, 6 years old. We're opening for Curtis, and his people just fall in love with the Wooten brothers. And so they're taking us in the studio, and Curtis Mayfield is going to discover the Wooten brothers the same way, Diana Ross gets the credit for discovering the Jackson 5, even though there's another story that says it was really another, well, I'll just say Gladys Knight actually, but I think the story is Berry Gordy or someone like Diana Ross better, so she got the credit. I don't know. But Curtis Mayfield was going to discover the Wooten brothers. And so we're actually in the studio recording. I'm 5 or 6 years old. There's other studio musicians helping us out, and we're in the studio and going to be big stars. And all of a sudden it just ended, and I'm young, so I barely remember it, don't think too much of it. But as I'm a little bit older, probably a late teenager or so, and now we're living in Virginia, I find out from my parents that somebody said, when we were living in California, somebody says, hey, there's already a group of 5 brothers living in California. We don't need another group of 5 brothers. So our thing just got squashed and ended. And of course, the other group of 5 brothers was the Jackson 5. So they were also living in California. So apparently our thing got squashed because the Jackson 5 were already doing it as 5 brothers. So that can be a bad thing, but I actually think life knows better. Because sometimes when you reach that success at such a young age, the kids and the parents may or may not be equipped to handle that success. So I think it's a fortunate thing that we didn't achieve it at that time. So that to me is a highlight, where it seems like life was protecting us and preparing us for something even greater than public fame. So I believe that us five brothers, as well as our parents, are stronger because of that. Yeah. I was playing another one I was playing. I'll try to not talk so long.
No, that's, this is your story.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I was playing with Béla Fleck, and my brother Roy, the drummer, plays in that band also. So we were hired, I guess, by the United States government, part of the government, to represent the United States in 7 different Asian countries as musical ambassadors. So it was what was called a State Department tour, where the state gives us high military ranking just so we can get into certain places and countries. And we went over and played concerts, basically. We played concerts. But we would play, we'd play some concerts for the regular public, but we'd also play concerts for ambassadors and high dignitary military and people like that. But we were somewhere, and I'd have to ask my wife, she remembers better than me because she was with us. But we played way in the outback of some hills of some country, like it was like in Thailand or Indonesia or something. And they told us, you're going to play for a tribe. They've never had live music before, never had a concert. There's about 2,000 people there. We hope maybe 500 will show up. So it just so happened that all 2,000 showed up. And, Béla Fleck and the Flecktones is a strange band on any good day. I mean, Béla's a banjo player already. I'm a crazy bass player. I would do backflips literally with the bass on, spinning it around my neck. My brother Roy plays at least in this band, he's an incredible drummer, but he also invented this weird electronic drum thing that looks like a guitar that you might see in the Twilight Zone or on the deck of the Star Trek Enterprise. You can't even tell he's playing drums because it looks like a futuristic guitar. And so we're playing that, and and the audience is, they're being polite, they're just listening to our music. But before we went over to any of these countries, Béla was smart. Béla sent out a message to all the countries and said, please send us a recording of your country's national songs that everybody knows. And so they sent them to us and we learned them. So every country we went to, we knew at least one of their national musical treasures. So when we're out there playing for this tribe, they're wearing robes. The men and the women have the long, robes on. The women have their faces covered. So, I don't know if it's what kind of culture or religion, but we're out there playing music and they're polite, they're listening. But when we went into their song, all 2,000 of them jumped up and started dancing and singing. And at that moment, Ryan, it was clear to me that this is what music is about. All of a sudden, it wasn't some people listening to some Americans play music. It wasn't an audience and a band. It wasn't people listening to music. All of a sudden, we became one entity. No question. We all felt that. There was no religion separating us. There was no politics, no borders, no laws. It wasn't even us and music. It was one thing happening. And at that point, I was like, this is what my parents had been talking about. Music needs to make us better. If you're going to put all this energy in it, this is what it's supposed to do. Make us better, make us people. And it was amazing. It was amazing, and I try to reach for that every time I play, even if it's with one person. I want that oneness, that connection, that betterment of all of us. And it's amazing how powerful music can do that. Music can make us forget, uh, not so much forget our differences, but recognize them, because in a band, every instrument is different, and we recognize and celebrate that. But music is powerful, how it can bring people together like that. So, anyway, those are two very highlights. One supposedly negative, with us getting held back in California, but I still see that as a positive. But the other one in playing for that Hill tribe, wow, how it brought us all together was amazing. And then also, you mentioned 5 Grammys. I can remember the first time we won a Grammy, and we're there, and they called our name, and we got to go up on stage and all of that. That's amazing. When you do something that you love to do, and you do it anyway for free, but all your peers, the greatest of the greats, celebrate you by giving you the highest honor for doing what you love to do. That is a great achievement. So I appreciate all of that.
Now, those are really interesting highlights, and even the one, and I agree with you. Sometimes I always say that God knows the ending before we know the beginning, and we just need to be spiritual passengers and just let him drive. Because when he drives, you're going in the right direction. Because I know in my life, every time I've taken the steering wheel, we've crashed. So, so sometimes, it's just learned how to be a spiritual passenger. Because, like a lot of times when we talk about all money is not good money.
Right.
And we had to witness nationally and internationally how the money and the early lifestyle of fame, what it did to the Jackson 5.
Yeah.
Yes, and on so many levels. And I mean, because in order to be successful in anything, you need to be grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same, and we see it a lot with people. But at the same time, I totally agree with you. But there wasn't only bad there. I don't want people to just think that, their whole thing was negative. When we think of what Joe Jackson and Catherine, the parents, what they did, how they took a poor family, 9 kids living in Gary, Indiana, poor, racism, how they could take that family and make them the biggest, most famous, popular black family in existence to this day.
But they had a price to pay.
Michael can actually become the king of pop through all this adversity.
Yeah, but they paid a high price. And
there's a high price, right?
And I think that sometimes, Victor, that I think that we miss that even, and you've said it so many times, is that you're doing what you love. And I think so many times we read about one hit artists that, but to be consistent in this field, and you have to be grounded, and you have to know really who you are, mm-hmm. and what it's about. Money is always nice, but it can't be the driving force, because many times that we know that you can get paid a lot of money, but if you don't like the job, they're not paying you enough.
Yeah.
But if it's something that you enjoy doing, money is just a bonus.
Right, exactly.
And I think so many times when we look at artists such as you, Victor, we realize that money is a bonus, because you enjoy what you do. And the audiences can truly feel from you when you enjoy your music. I mean, that's how mm-hmm. they really get into it. And so
absolutely.
And being on tour. So do you and your brother still jam a little bit? Yes,
we do. Unfortunately, we lost our brother Rudy, the saxophone player, Rudy, brother. We lost him, I think, 10 years ago. Way too young. I think he was just in his early 50s, younger than I am now. But yeah, the four of us still get to do it. We still, people know if they come see the Wooten brothers, it's going to get funky. But we also all venture out and do different things, but we always come back together. We were in, I believe it was Cincinnati a few years ago. We did a funk tour, the Funk Explosion tour, with the four of us brothers. We had another friend of ours come in on sax, but then we had the comedian musician Sinbad with us.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and Sinbad is like a funk, or really definitely funk, but a music historian. He's not just a funny man. But we combined all these old school funk tunes with his comedy. And it was a great, incredible night of music. We did a tour, and I hope we can do this again because it was an ingenious idea, and Sinbad and the Wooten brothers was the perfect combination to pull it off.
You know, there talk about when you look on your website and getting your information about you, they talk about, now I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's that Foldera?
Yeah, Foldera. Yeah.
Foldera.
Yeah.
Foldera bass. Now tell me what makes that so unique.
Well,
You're going to show it to me.
Right here. This is a fretless one, meaning that it doesn't have those metal things on it. This is a fretless. But this one, you can see the yin yang shape on the body.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, with the two dots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was just lucky that in the early 80s when us five brothers were doing a deal with Arista Records, we were working with this great producer who was producing our record. He was also producing a record on Kenny G, and he was also producing part of the debut record for this beautiful model who could sing like no one else. And her name happened to be Whitney Houston. So Kashif was producing these three records. Actually, my brothers Joseph on keys, Joseph sang and Roy played some drums on Whitney Houston's very first record. But back then, we were also doing a record for the same label, Arista. And the producer Kashif, for whatever reason, didn't like the bass that I had. So I was in the market for another bass, and another guy that was working with us in the studio said, "Hey, I got these friends that are making basses." And it happened to be a guy named Vinny Foldera. And so Vinny's partner, Joey Laracella, came to the studio with two basses. And I've had one of those basses since that day. I did not let him leave with it. I said, this is it. The bass I had because I was a fan of Stanley Clarke.
Oh, Stanley Clarke.
Yeah, and so my parents ended up, when I was 12 years old, no, let me think. Yeah, seventh grade. So I'm about 12 years old, and they bought me the same model that Stanley Clarke was playing. And so I've always been little and small and short. This bass was too big, but there was no way I was going to say no. Because it was a limbic bass, the first really high quality bass that was available. But anyway, that bass was always too big for me. But in 1983, when we were in the studio up north with Kashif, when Joey Laracella brought this Foldera over, it felt so good. It just felt like me. It was smaller and felt like it not only melted into my hands, but into my whole body. And it was like wearing a comfortable shirt that you forget what you're wearing. You forget what it says because you just put it on because it's comfortable. When I'm playing music, that's what I want. I want to forget about the bass because the bass doesn't make music. Like when I just sit it down, you don't hear anything. The music comes from me. So I play through the bass the same way your mouth doesn't do the talking, you do. The mouth is just an instrument we speak through. So the bass, when I first put that bass on, it felt like it just went away. And it just felt so good. So since 1983, I've been using Fodera basses. I have some other models, but I'm a Fodera person. That's what just, I feel at home. They used to build basses for other companies, but they started their own company at that time, in that year in 1983. And so I was one of the first artists to like be known as a Fodera guy. And fortunately, this was before anyone really knew who I was, or anyone who knew who Fodera was. But now Fodera, if you can think of the highest, most priciest, highest regard automobile, whether it's a Porsche or a Lamborghini or whatever, I don't even know cars, but that's what Fodera is to basses these days. It's at the top.
Kind of like a Stradivarius in a violin? Kind of like a Stradivarius?
Like a Stradivarius, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Not as old. Like a lot of thing about the Stradivarius is the age.
Yeah.
It was an excellent, hundreds of years ago. Even though Fodera is newer, 83, they still have that status. Yes.
So I mean, that's just so fascinating to hear that. And like, I like to just hear about 3 things. 3 is my favorite number here. 3 things that, that were very memorable that might have not been, because the story, the show must go on. Yes. I'm sure, because while you were talking about this, it came to my mind that while you were doing the music with the tribe, you didn't have any hookups, did you? I mean, you didn't have any electricity, so everything.
Yeah, actually, there was electricity.
Okay.
Electricity, fortunately, yes, but we were outdoors in a pavilion, and they did wire up generators and electricity for us.
I was thinking about that because the way that you had described it, it was sounding a rather primitive.
It was.
Okay. So,
yeah.
But anyway, like sometimes, like you're going on stage and the thrill of seeing the audience, and maybe a string breaks.
That's happened many times.
And so how do you handle those kind of things? So what I was asking was, give me 3 things that kind of happen, like the show must go on, but folks maybe never know.
Yeah, well, and in many cases, the folks do know. Here's the thing: if the public knows there's a problem, but you persevere through it anyway and still give them a show, they love you more. They love you more. I like to give the example of, you go to the circus and you see a man or a woman on a tightrope, way up in the air on a little thin wire, and they're doing a show. Well, just because the fact that they're up there lets you know they can do it. They can walk straight across, but you don't want to see them walk straight across. That's not exciting. You want to see them lose their balance, and you don't want to see them fall either. You just want to see them almost fall and recover. Right? And then you give them a standing ovation. So sometimes when we make it look too easy, it's not as exciting. But when they see you go through some issues and sweat or break a string or whatever and persevere anyway, they're on your side, because that's why the audience is there. They came to be on your side. It's not like sports where half the audience is against you. At a concert, the whole audience is there for you. That's why they got in the car and came and paid money. They're for you. There's not a whole lot of things in life like that, where everybody's on your side. So, yeah, I've had strings break, but strings breaking is the easy part. They make 4, 5, 6, 7 string. They make 8-string basses. I play a 4-string, but even if I break 1 string, I still have 3 left. For me, that's no big deal. For some people, it might be a big deal. For me, it's not, but I make it a big deal if it happens on stage. Okay. So I've had a string break, and it's usually the highest string. And, we make our money on the lower strings. Right? We call the higher part, we call that the upper register, but the lower part we call the cash register. Right? That's the part of the bass that makes you move. When we're going to listen to the OJ's For the Love of Money with Anthony Jackson, or even Doug Dunn playing Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, that's down low. Right? So if I lose my high string, big deal. I can play down low. But if I break it, I make a show out of it. You know, I'll pull it, make it so everyone can see it, and I'll just start playing, going crazy, or pull it a little more. Then I might actually pull it off the bass and throw it to someone in the audience, and the audience just gets riled up and goes crazy. So I like to make a show out of it, you know, even though it's not that difficult to play, for me anyway, to play with 3 strings. It's not that difficult. But I do a thing sometimes where I spin the bass around my neck, sort of like a hula hoop goes around your waist. So I've got the bass, it's going my strap around my neck, and I can grab it and throw it real hard, and it'll go around and come back, and I keep playing. And people just love that. Well, in my early days, before I realized that the strap that I'm wearing is possible to break, especially if I keep putting stress on it by spinning it around, which it wasn't made for. I never realized that the straps can break, but I found out the hard way. In the middle of a show where I go to spin the bass and I do it like this, and the strap just snaps and the bass goes flying across the stage and hits the ground. So you have to remember, Ryan, I'm lucky enough to not only grow up in the era of Motown and Stax and Muscle Shoals and the Funk Brothers and James Jamerson and all this, you know, Little Stevie Wonder and James Brown and King Records. Not only did I grow up in that era, I grew up aware of that music because I was playing it. So musically, I was aware of things that other little kids weren't. We knew the music as little kids, but us brothers knew it inside and out, and we knew the artists. And at that time, when Motown was coming out of Detroit with Berry Gordy, there was not an act that came out of Motown that had not gone through performance school. So it wasn't just about being a good musician. You needed to know how to dress. The Supremes had to know every hand position. You had to know all the steps, like the Temptations and the Four Tops, the Miracles. You had to know everything. So us brothers growing up in that era knew about performing. We were performers. And when I was a kid, 5 and 6, up until about 8 or 9, Reggie would teach me my routines. And Reggie taught me how to perform. So now as an adult, performance is just unconscious. It just kicks in. And when things go wrong, it kicks in harder. So the first time I spun the bass and it flew across the stage, my body did not let me run after it. Because if I ran after it, the audience would know that was a mistake. Right? And I didn't want to show that. So I'm in the middle of this crazy bass solo that Béla Fleck always gives me, this amazing bass solo. And I'm doing this thing, and I go to the climax, and I spin the bass, and it just flies across the stage. And we're in this outdoor arena, and it's an outdoor theater where sometimes some symphonies play, and symphonies usually play like the bands up here. I'm sorry, the singers and maybe the Broadway shows up here, but down in the pit is where the band is sitting. Well, the pit was a big concrete like dungeon almost. And my bass, it seemed like my bass landed on the edge of the stage and was like balancing, about to fall into the pit, right? That's what it felt like. But instead of running after it, I just put my hands on my waist and stood there confidently just looking at it. And then the audience just like froze. Of course, my brother on the drums kept kicking it. Béla kept his seat, and I just stood. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just stood there and looked at it. And our piano player at the time got up, because it was right in front of him. He just got up, grabbed the bass off the edge, off the ledge, brought it over to me, and as soon as I just let him do it. I just stood there still. And as soon as he handed it to me, I took it and swung it around more and just started beating it. And everyone in the audience just jumped up. You know, I couldn't get a real sound out of it. The neck was cracked, everything, but I played it anyway. And whatever sound came out of it, the audience loved. And fortunately, I had another bass. So I was able to, do some crazy stuff, spin around, roll around, do some craziness. And then I put the bass on the stand and picked up the other bass and finished the song. The audience went crazy. They went crazy, And so I allow the mishaps when I can to make us rise higher. We've had the whole electricity or fire drill go off in the theater, right? So we all went out into the parking lot, into the street, and kept playing and singing. And the audience loved that. They feel like they got more than their money's worth. So as you say, the show must go on.
The last thing, the last two things I want to talk about are, first, what are you doing now?
Yes.
In spite of the pandemic, what are your future plans, or where are you, and what are you doing at this point in time in your musical career? And secondly, like for you to tell us about how important you think the Funk Music Hall of Fame is.
Absolutely. Easy. I'm actually being able to keep busy during this pandemic time. The main thing I'm doing is spending time with my family, because I've fortunately have been successful. I haven't been home, for months at a time with my kids in their lives. Every time I come home, as soon as my kids could learn to talk, I'd come home and they say, "Daddy, when do you have to leave again? Or how long are you home this time?" And that's been digging at my heart for decades. But now I get to be home, so I'm trying not to spend my time home playing music. I want to be the dad that I haven't been able to be. I've been a good dad. I've done my best, but now I can be a dad that's home for months at a time. So, there's violin, practice, and soccer practice. And, two of our kids are out of the house. One graduated college and the other's in his second year. So I've got two more at home, and I don't want to be away their whole lives while I'm off. So I'm mostly spending time with them. But I'm also able to do some music and hopefully still provide an income by recording, working on projects, putting out music and things like that. So I am doing a lot of talking like this, teaching online. I've run 4 of my music camps online this summer. I teach for a Berklee College of Music. They're out of Boston.
Oh, yes.
And so I usually go to Boston every month for a week, but now I'm doing it remote. I finished writing a second book about music and life. And it's a novel. Instead of writing just an instruction book, I wrote a story. And the first one it came out maybe in 2008, called The Music Lesson. And it's a story about a teacher and a student. And I just finished a sequel that should come out early next year, and it's called The Spirit of Music. I also wrote a second concerto, an orchestra piece for electric bass and orchestra, which I'll be performing next year. And so I'm able to keep busy while I'm home, because I'm literally, as you can probably tell, I'm sitting in a recording studio, which is in my basement, so I can record, write, talk to people, Zoom, collaborate, and keep busy. But I can take a break and go right upstairs and be with my kids and my family, which is really, really nice. So that's some of the things that I'm doing right now. But Ryan, even more than that, what I'm doing and what I really urge everybody to do is to work on who we are apart from what we do. In other words, I am a musician, and most of the people out there know me as a musician, but music is what I do, and I can put that down. In other words, I've got basses that I put down, but who am I once the bass is put down? Because my kids don't really care that I play bass. That's not what they want when daddy comes home. Dad, play bass for me. No. They want me to be dad. They want a relationship. They want support. They want me to tell them how good they are, how cute they are, help them with this. Daddy, can you fix this? That's the man I need to be. I need to be a good husband, right? I need to, all the things that my parents instilled into me, I need to foster that. So I need to make sure that I'm a good person and make that better. And here's the opportunity to do it. And many people are struggling because we define ourselves by what we do, many of us. We define ourselves by what we do. And now that we can't do what we do, many of us don't know who we are because we've been defining ourselves wrong, incorrectly. So this is, for me, my chance to make sure that I come out of this pandemic better, me personally. And then what I do, of course, is going to be better because I'm better. And in all cases, even the audiences, more than just liking my music, they want to like me. They want a relationship with me. And social media is the proof of that, right? People want to know what the artist had for breakfast. Where are you going shopping? What did you eat today? All right? It's not just the music that drives with Michael Jackson or James Brown. We want to know them, And so it's the same thing here. I want to make me better, right? Because if I'm better, I can help my kids to be better. I can be a better husband to my wife, a better dad, a better friend, a better musician, a better entertainer. So I'm spending most of my time working on that, working on me in a way now that I have the time to do it. And I urge all of us to do that. And in this way, I believe we will not return to normal. We will return better than normal because normal got us to this pandemic place. We shouldn't be trying to come back there. We need to surpass normal. And the best way to do it is to make ourselves better. So that's the main thing that I'm doing. And funk, as again, it's a part of life. It's a lifestyle. And as you said also, we need to pay it forward as we look back. And as we look back and recognize the past, we're also paying it backwards by recognizing and honoring our ancestors, because many of our funk brothers and sisters are still alive, right? And the current generation at around my age generation and after, we stopped really celebrating our elders, our ancestors, right? Back when, before, you looked up to your grandparents, right? And in earlier tribes, it was the grandparents who raised the kids. So you looked up to your elders. Now, we don't even look up to anyone. We look sideways at our peers. We look at people, we admire people who are our age, who don't know anything more than we do, right? We try to impress our peers. And to me, that's a shame because our peers don't know much more than we do. But if we look back to our elders and celebrate them, there we can really gain some inspiration, knowledge, right? And the fact that Bootsy Collins, George Clinton, right? Some of the members of Cameo or maybe the OJs,
The Ohio Players.
The Ohio Players. Thank you very much.
Lakeside.
Right? And I'm so sad. I'm so sad when what was it? Sugarfoot, I think, that we lost not long ago. But man, we need to celebrate these people while they're alive. Let them know that they meant something to us, more than just we bought your record. That they infected our homes. When we bought their record, our families came together. to listen to the whole record, not just one single. We listened to the whole record and read every word on the album credits. We knew who you were. If you played bass, if you were Robert Wilson, the young brother of the Gap Band playing bass, I read your name on the record. I knew who you were. I listened to your music. We need to let these people know that, right? And not only for them, but it makes us better as we carry the funk tradition further. It makes us better because our feet are on solid ground. Not only are they on solid ground, we know what the ground is all about. And one of the best ways of doing that for a young generation who may only be looking forward, museums of all types help us to look backwards and appreciate it. And again, funk music comes from an African American culture. And if we don't look back, history's not going to do it for us, right? A lot of our music, a lot of our achievements, you talked about the Black history of classical music, right? If you really study history, I'm not going to go totally there, but it'll point at the possibility, I'll leave it at that a lot of our classical heroes may have had some African blood in them, right? And history may have changed that, because history, of course, it's, the word points to a male mentality, and even that mentality didn't represent all people. So we need people like you, and we appreciate people like you for giving us the memories, showing us where we came from. I'm 55 years old, but I'm still standing on shoulders, right? So in music, I'm now considered one of the elders, but I'm still standing on people's shoulders way before me. I could, not only artists, I can name bass players, singers, and I know a lot of who they are, but I still know that there's some that I don't even recognize, that I don't even remember. So when I get to set foot in the museum, I'm coming there with a notepad, a camera, if you let me take pictures, because I know that I'm going to learn and grow. And because of it, I'm going to have more to share to people every time I talk about music and funk. So I thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Victor. This has been a heartwarming, informative, educational Funk Chronicles. So this is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles. Until the next time, keep it funky, keep it funky.
We need to love each other, Adrian. Yeah, Victor, man. Give them love on your best, man. Give them love, man.